The notice was already zip-tied to the gate when he arrived. It stated in formal language that access hours had been temporarily adjusted and that any entry outside the posted window would be considered a violation subject to penalty. He read it once, then he unlocked the gate, drove through, and locked it behind him, exactly as instructed. The cabin sat 3 miles past that gate, up a single gravel road that cut through pine and rock. There was no alternate route, no service entrance. The gate controlled everything. Until that morning, it had always been open. By the time he reached the cabin, his phone showed the time, 6:47 a.m. The notice said access began at 7. He took a photo of the gate before the turn, another when he reached the driveway, a third of the notice itself, close enough that the date stamp was visible. He did not call the HOA. That afternoon, an email arrived. It thanked him for his cooperation and reminded him that access hours were now 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., effective immediately. The message referenced recent concerns but did not describe them. It concluded by noting that compliance will prevent future action. He replied with a single sentence, "Received."
The following morning, the gate was locked at 6:58 a.m. He waited in his truck, engine off, hazard lights on. At exactly 7 o'clock, he unlocked it and drove through. He took photos again. Same angles, same sequence. On the third day, the access window changed. The new notice cited maintenance coordination and reduced access to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. A printed HOA letterhead was stapled beneath the original sign. No board vote was referenced, no emergency cited. He complied. He adjusted his schedule, arrived later, left earlier. Each time he documented the lock, the signage, and the timestamps. On day 6, a certified letter arrived at the cabin. It stated that he had accessed the road outside authorized hours on 2 occasions and that a fine would be assessed unless corrective behavior was demonstrated. The dates listed matched mornings when the gate had still been unlocked before the posted time. He reviewed his photos. They showed the gate open at 6:55 on one date, locked at 6:58 on the next. The notice still said access began at 7. 2 days later, the HOA updated its community map. The road was now labeled HOA Regulated Access. He noticed because he checked. The map had not changed in years. The property lines were unchanged. The road's designation had been altered quietly, without announcement. He saved the PDF. He noted the timestamp in the file metadata. That week, the access window narrowed again, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The explanation this time was firmer. The notice referenced authority granted under community rules and warned that continued violations could result in restricted access enforcement. He replied to the email with the same sentence as before, "Received." By the end of the week, the HOA believed it had established control. The notices grew more confident. The language shifted from temporary to regulated. The map update remained live. The certified letters stopped referencing warnings and began referencing penalties. A second fine was issued. This one included a deadline. He paid it. The check memo read, "Paid under notice dated, date." He scanned the check before mailing it. He scanned the envelope. He scanned the delivery confirmation. There were now 3 things happening at once. First, the HOA was shortening access windows without citing process. Second, it was penalizing behavior that complied with posted rules. Third, it was documenting everything, confidently. And he was allowing it. On the 10th day, a contractor truck sat idling near the gate when he arrived. The driver told him the HOA had asked him to wait. There was confusion about access authority. The gate remained locked until 9 a.m. He took photos of the truck, the license plate, the lock, the notice. When the gate finally opened, the contractor waved and said, "They're trying to sort it out." He drove through without comment. That night, a new email arrived.
It stated that the HOA was formalizing control of shared infrastructure and that residents should expect continued enforcement adjustments. Attached was a draft policy. It referred to the road as community managed. It required permits for access outside posted hours. It cited no deed, no easement, no recorded agreement. He read it carefully. Then he opened a new folder on his computer. He named it with the road designation as it existed on his deed. He placed every photo, every notice, every email, every map version, and every payment receipt inside. The HOA believed resistance would look like anger. Instead, it was being recorded, and it had just taken the first step without realizing the ground it stood on had never belonged to it.
The first permit requirement appeared without explanation. It was added as a paragraph at the bottom of a revised notice, printed on the same HOA letterhead, using the same neutral language as before. Access outside posted hours would now require prior written authorization. Requests were to be submitted no less than 48 hours in advance. No appeal process was listed. He read it once, then he adjusted. That weekend, he submitted a request to access the road at 6:30 a.m. on Monday. The reason was factual and brief: arrival before sunrise due to weather conditions at higher elevation. The request was acknowledged automatically. On Monday morning, he arrived at the gate at 6:29 a.m. The lock was engaged. He waited. At 6:47, an email notification arrived on his phone. The request had been denied. No reason given. At 7:01, the gate unlocked as scheduled. He drove through. He took photos. Same angles, same sequence. He saved the denial email. He noted the time.
2 days later, a new notice replaced the old one. Access hours were unchanged, but the permit language had expanded. It now stated that permits were discretionary and issued at the sole determination of the association. The word sole had been underlined. He submitted another request, different date, same format, same tone. This time, the denial came 12 hours later. Again, no reason. By the end of the week, 3 requests had been denied. Each denial had a different response time. Each was saved. Each was labeled. The HOA began issuing fines again. One fine referenced unauthorized attempted access. Another cited failure to comply with permit procedures. He paid both. Each check included a memo referencing the notice date and permit request number. Each payment confirmation was saved. The HOA responded with a general announcement email to the community. It explained that firm enforcement was necessary and that access controls were being implemented for the benefit of all residents. It referenced safety, maintenance, and consistency. It did not reference ownership. The map on the HOA website was updated again. This version included a legend. The road was now marked with a symbol typically used for shared amenities. The file name included the current month. He downloaded it. He compared it to the previous version. Only the road designation had changed. He did not comment. At the next access window change, the HOA shortened the hours by another hour at each end. No justification was given. That same day, a neighbor sent him a message asking if he had heard about the new road rules. The message included a screenshot of the HOA announcement. He replied politely that he was following posted notices, nothing more. Mid-week, a formal letter arrived by certified mail. It stated that continued violations could result in restricted access measures. It referenced the HOA's authority over community infrastructure and cited internal policy numbers. It included a warning that failure to comply could escalate enforcement. He reviewed the policies cited. They were internal documents. None were recorded. None referenced deeds, easements, or county filings. He placed the letter in the folder. This was the moment when the HOA believed it had leverage. From its perspective, the homeowner was paying fines, submitting requests, and complying with every instruction. There were no angry emails,
No disputes, no legal language. Silence looked like acceptance. The next step came quickly. The HOA issued a notice requiring permits for all access, including during posted hours. The access window remained listed, but entry now required approval regardless of time. The notice concluded with a sentence that stood out. Unauthorized access may result in enforcement action, including denial of future access. He submitted one final request. It was for access during the posted window. The reason field contained a single word: residence. The denial arrived 2 hours later. That evening, he organized the folder again. Every notice was ordered by date, every email was matched to a timestamp, every map version was labeled. The paid fines were cross-referenced to the alleged violations. Nothing was missing. At this point, it appeared that the HOA had won. Access was controlled, permits were denied, fines were paid. The road was publicly labeled as regulated. From the outside, resistance had ended. But the trap had already formed. The HOA had created a complete written record asserting authority it did not have, enforcing rules it could not legally enforce, and documenting each step in its own words. And it had done so confidently. If you want to see how calm documentation can dismantle power without confrontation, subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are real, quiet, and decided on paper. The first public reference appeared in a meeting agenda. It was listed as a short item near the end: Road Access Oversight Status Update. He saw it because the HOA posted agendas 48 hours in advance. He downloaded the PDF as soon as it went live. The document listed no attachments, no motions, and no votes scheduled. He did not attend the meeting. Instead, he reviewed the governing documents again: the declaration, the plot map, the county recorded easements. The road was not listed as a common element. There was no language granting access control. There was no mention of permits. The meeting minutes were posted 3 days later. Under the agenda item, a single paragraph summarized the discussion. It stated that the HOA had confirmed its role in regulating access to community infrastructure, and that enforcement measures were ongoing. No dissent was noted. He saved the minutes. That same week, the HOA published a revised policy packet on its website. It included a newly formatted document titled Access Control Guidelines. The road was referenced by name. The document stated that the association maintains authority over scheduling, permits, and enforcement. The footer included the HOA logo and a revision date. There was still no reference to a deed, easement, or recorded agreement. He printed the guidelines. He placed them in the folder. The escalation continued. A contractor hired by the HOA installed a keypad on the gate. The original lock remained, but the keypad was mounted beside it, wired into a control box. A laminated instruction sheet was zip-tied below the notice board. Residents were instructed to request temporary codes. He photographed the installation from multiple angles. The contractor's vehicle was marked. The work order number was visible on the dashboard. He noted the date and time. Later that afternoon, an email went out to the community. It announced the keypad as an improvement and stated that it would streamline access management. It encouraged residents to contact the HOA office for codes and reminded them that unauthorized entry could result in penalties. The email ended with a line that read, "Please note that this road is managed under association authority." He archived the message. The next denial arrived the following morning. He had submitted a permit request for access during posted hours as required. The denial cited temporary capacity constraints. No explanation followed. At 9 a.m., the gate unlocked automatically. He entered using the keypad code that had been issued to contractors. The code was posted openly on the instruction sheet. He did not input it. He unlocked the original lock as he had done every day before.
He documented both methods. He documented which one he used. 2 days later, a notice of violation was issued. It stated that he had circumvented access procedures by failing to use the keypad system. The fine was higher than before. The notice referenced the access control guidelines by name. He paid it. The HOA responded by suspending his ability to request permits online. The email explained that repeated violations had resulted in temporary administrative restrictions. It instructed him to submit requests by mail instead. He printed the email. He noted the time. By now, the HOA's position was consistent. It believed the road was under its control. It believed it could regulate access unilaterally. It believed compliance had been established. It had said so publicly, in writing, multiple times. What it had not done was explain why. That omission was now irreversible. The homeowner sent his first formal letter. It was addressed to the HOA's office. It was factual and brief. It requested copies of any recorded documents granting the association authority over the road, including easements, deeds, or agreements. The letter cited no accusations. It referenced only the policies and notices already issued. It requested a response within a reasonable time. The HOA replied 2 weeks later. The response stated that authority derived from long-standing practice and community governance. It referenced internal policies and board discretion. It did not include any recorded documents. He placed the response in the folder. He sent a second letter. This one requested clarification on whether the road was considered a common element under the declaration. It attached a copy of the plat map with the road highlighted. It asked for confirmation. The response arrived faster. It stated that the road was treated as a managed asset and that the association was acting in the best interests of the community. The phrase "treated as" was underlined. He did not reply. Instead, he organized the evidence chronologically: notices, emails, maps, policies, minutes, installation photos, payment records, letters. The pattern was now complete. The HOA had not merely overreached, it had documented the overreach step by step. It had enforced it, penalized it, and announced it publicly. And it had done so without a single legal foundation. The final escalation came quietly. A notice appeared stating that future violations could result in complete suspension of access privileges. There was no further explanation. From the outside, it looked like the end, but internally, the record was finished. Every assumption the HOA had made was now locked into its own documents, and there was nothing left to argue. The suspension notice arrived without ceremony. It was delivered by email and certified mail on the same day, using the same template as the previous violations. The subject line read, "Notice of Access Restriction, effective immediately." The letter stated that due to repeated non-compliance, the homeowner's access privileges were suspended pending review. No time frame was given, no appeal instructions were included. The final sentence was short and direct. Entry during suspension may result in further enforcement action. He read it once. The next morning, the gate did not unlock. The keypad accepted no code. The original lock had been replaced overnight. A new padlock hung from the chain, thicker than the previous one. A laminated notice was attached stating that access was restricted by order of the association. He parked on the shoulder outside the gate. He took photographs, wide shots, close-ups, the new lock, the notice, the absence of any posted schedule. He did not attempt entry. Instead, he opened his laptop and reviewed the documents again. The suspension notice referenced internal policies. The policies referenced authority. The authority referenced nothing. Still, the impact was real. For the first time since the process began, he could not reach his property. That was the point. From the HOA's perspective, escalation had finally produced control. The homeowner had complied long enough to establish jurisdiction, and now enforcement had teeth. That afternoon, the HOA sent a community-wide email. It explained that access restrictions had been imposed to address repeated violations and reassured residents that the association was acting responsibly. It emphasized safety and governance. The road was referred to as association-managed infrastructure. There was no mention of ownership. He saved the email. 2 days later, a follow-up message went out. It stated that access to the road would be limited to authorized users only, and that any attempt to bypass controls would be treated seriously. The HOA believed this was closure. It had the narrative, it had the enforcement, it had silence from the homeowner. Neighbors assumed the issue was resolved. What they did not see was the request he filed that same morning. It was not a complaint. It was a mediation request submitted to the county's Community Dispute Resolution Office. The form required a description of the issue, supporting documentation, and the specific relief requested. His description was factual. He stated that an association had asserted control over a road leading to his property, restricted access, imposed fines, and suspended entry. He requested a determination regarding authority and access rights. The relief requested was simple: confirmation of lawful control or cessation of enforcement. He attached the folder. Every notice, every email, every policy, every map revision, every payment receipt, every photograph, every letter exchanged. He did not add commentary. The submission receipt included a timestamp. 3 days later, the mediation office acknowledged the request and notified the HOA. The HOA responded within 24 hours. Its reply was confident. It stated that the association had long managed the road and that enforcement was necessary to maintain order. It attached internal policies and meeting minutes. It cited community governance. It did not attach a deed. It did not attach an easement. It did not attach a recorded agreement. The mediation office scheduled a preliminary review. In the meantime, the suspension remained in effect. A contractor arrived at the gate one morning and unlocked it using a master key. He entered without hesitation. The lock was secured again afterward. The homeowner photographed the interaction from a distance. The contrast was clear. Restricted access applied selectively. He added the photos to the folder.
At this point, the audience would reasonably assume the worst. The homeowner was locked out. The HOA was united. Enforcement was active. The narrative favored authority. There were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices, no emergency injunctions, just a locked gate. 2 weeks passed. The mediation office requested additional clarification from the HOA. Specifically, it asked for documentation establishing the association's right to regulate access to the road. The HOA replied with a longer statement. It referenced historical usage, maintenance activities, and past board decisions. It attached additional internal emails and a contractor invoice. Still, no recorded authority. The office requested the county plat. The HOA attached the same community map it had published online. The mediation office replied once more. It noted that the plat did not designate the road as a common element and asked whether any easement existed granting access control. The HOA did not respond immediately. During this pause, the suspension remained. From the outside, nothing changed, but internally, the process had shifted. The HOA was no longer enforcing rules. It was being asked to justify them. And for the first time, silence did not look like compliance. It looked like absence. The HOA's response arrived as a packet. It was longer than anything before it, multiple pages, letterhead on every sheet. The tone was formal and measured, as if volume itself might substitute for foundation. The opening paragraph asserted authority. The next 3 explained intent. The remaining pages attempted to reconstruct history. The HOA argued that the road had functioned as a shared access point for years, and that the association had assumed responsibility for its maintenance.
It cited informal arrangements, past repairs, and community expectations. Attached were invoices from contractors, internal emails discussing maintenance schedules, a board resolution referencing road oversight passed months earlier. The resolution was not recorded. The invoices did not convey ownership. The emails referenced assumptions. There was still no deed, no easement, no grant of control.
The mediation office acknowledged receipt. 2 days later, it sent a short follow-up request. It asked a single question. Please identify the recorded instrument granting the association authority to regulate access to this road. The HOA replied within hours. This time, the tone shifted. The response stated that authority arose from customary use and community consent. It argued that formal recording was unnecessary because the association had acted openly and consistently. It attached the same documents again. The mediation office replied once more. It explained, politely, that customary practice does not create property rights and that consent must be documented. It reiterated the request for a recorded instrument. There was no immediate reply. During this silence, the HOA continued enforcement. A new notice was issued, stating that suspension remained in effect. It warned that attempts to challenge the restriction could result in extended enforcement measures. The notice was added to the folder. The mediation office then requested one additional item from the HOA: confirmation of whether the homeowner's deed referenced any access limitations. The homeowner's response was immediate. He submitted a copy of his deed. It showed unrestricted access via the road, no conditions, no shared control. The HOA responded 2 days later. It argued that the deed was outdated and that community governance had evolved. It suggested that the association's policies effectively modified access rights over time. This was the moment the trap locked. By arguing that internal policies could override recorded deeds, the HOA had moved from overreach into contradiction. The mediation office recognized it. Its next communication was no longer framed as clarification, it was framed as a finding. The office noted that the association had asserted exclusive control over access to a road without producing any recorded authority. It noted that enforcement actions, fines, and suspension had been imposed based on internal policies alone. It requested the HOA's position on immediate cessation of enforcement pending review. The HOA replied defensively. It stated that lifting enforcement would undermine governance and create precedent. It insisted that control was necessary to maintain order. The mediation office scheduled a formal determination. Notice was sent to both parties. The HOA prepared extensively. It submitted additional statements. It referenced community expectations. It argued that the homeowner had previously complied, suggesting implied consent. The homeowner submitted nothing new. He relied entirely on the existing record. The determination meeting was conducted remotely. There were no raised voices. The HOA spoke first. It outlined its role, its responsibilities, and its belief that control was justified. It emphasized safety, maintenance, and consistency. When asked to identify the legal basis for access control, it referenced policy. When asked where the policy derived authority, it referenced practice. When asked whether any recorded instrument existed, it acknowledged that none had been produced. The mediation officer asked one final question. Is it the association's position that internal policy can suspend access to private property without recorded authority? The HOA representative hesitated, then answered, yes. That answer was documented. The HOA owner was asked if he wished to add anything. He declined. The determination was issued 3 days later.
It concluded that the road was not a common element, that no recorded authority existed granting the association control, and that all enforcement actions related to access were unauthorized. It ordered immediate cessation of enforcement, removal of locks, cancellation of fines, and written notice to residents clarifying the association's lack of authority over the road. The HOA was given 10 days to comply. The suspension ended the next morning. The new padlock was removed. The keypad was disabled. The original gate was left unlocked. A community email followed that afternoon. It stated that access controls had been temporarily discontinued pending review. It did not admit error, but the record did. The HOA's authority had not been challenged through argument. It had been undone through its own words.
The gate remained open after the locks were removed. No notice replaced them, no schedule was posted. The keypad stayed dark, its screen unlit, the wiring still visible but disconnected. He drove through without stopping. There was no sense of relief, no satisfaction, only confirmation. That afternoon, the HOA sent a second community email. This one was shorter. It stated that road access would revert to previous conditions and that residents should disregard earlier guidance related to permits, schedules, or restrictions. It advised that future questions would be addressed after further review. No explanation followed. Within a week, the HOA website was updated. The access control guidelines were removed. The revised map was replaced with an older version. Meeting minutes referencing road oversight were quietly edited, the language softened, the implication of authority removed. Nothing was announced. Residents noticed anyway. The contractor stopped waiting at the gate. Service vehicles entered freely. The instruction sheet was taken down. The chain was removed entirely. The road returned to what it had always been. The mediation office issued its final compliance confirmation. It acknowledged that enforcement had ceased and that the association had complied with the determination. It closed the file. No penalties were assessed. No damages were sought. The homeowner did not request reimbursement for fines. He did not ask for apologies. There was nothing left to do. A month later, the HOA held its annual meeting. The agenda contained no reference to the road. One board member resigned the following week. No reason was given. Another stepped down before the next quarter. The remaining board revised several policies unrelated to access, adding language about adherence to recorded authority. The change was subtle, but it was permanent. What collapsed was not the association itself. It was the assumption that silence meant consent. The HOA had believed that repeated enforcement would normalize control, that compliance would solidify authority, that confidence would replace documentation. Instead, every notice had become evidence. Every policy had become an admission. Every fine had become a timestamp. The homeowner never argued. He never accused anyone of misconduct. He never claimed harm. He never demanded restoration. He simply allowed the association to define its position fully and publicly. Then he asked a neutral body to read it. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, neighbors asked quiet questions. Some wanted to know what had changed. Others asked whether access rules might return. A few asked how the situation had been resolved. He answered simply. There was no authority to begin with. No one challenged that. The HOA did not attempt to reassert control. It did not revise the declaration. It did not seek an easement. It did not pursue legal action. It adjusted. The system corrected itself because it had been allowed to expose itself. There was no dramatic ending, no courtroom scene, no raised voices, no public apology, just a locked gate that stayed open. The lesson was not about winning. It was about patience, about understanding that power, when undocumented, cannot survive scrutiny.
that authority must be proven, not repeated, that enforcement without foundation eventually collapses under its own weight. The homeowner returned to his routine. He arrived early when he needed to. He left late when weather required it. He stopped documenting. There was no reason to anymore. The folder remained on his computer, unchanged. It would not be needed again. If you value real cases where calm documentation, not confrontation, restores balance, subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't about revenge. They're about letting the system reveal the truth. The road stayed open, and no one ever questioned why again.